Dear Mr. Stew, I've noticed that I let my kid watch anything they want, regardless of the age rating. Recently, my child watched a movie that seemed to give them nightmares. This made me wonder, why do content ratings and warnings on TV shows, movies, and video games matter? How can I ensure that my child is watching content that is appropriate for their age group and mental well-being? Thank you for your advice. This is a great question and one that comes up pretty often because a lot of times the things that kids want to participate in can be above their age range. It can be above the things that are rated as appropriate for them. And it's important to know that those ratings are guidelines. They're not laws or anything like that. They are guidelines, and they are guidelines made by parents. The group that puts together the age ratings and guidelines for video games and TV shows and movies is just a group of parents and teachers and other people that know kids, and they make decisions based on their opinions. So it's important to know, first off, that you have to know your child and know what it is they can handle. Know what it is that would be appropriate for them specifically. Them, not other kids around their age, but your child. Try to figure out what is best for them. Now, beyond that, there are some things to take into consideration. And if you look at ratings, there are some things that you can see as pretty standard as the ratings increase. Shows and movies and video games that are created for very young children are very animated and not realistic whatsoever. Things like Peppa Pig, things like Blue's Clues, those things aren't realistic. If a child looks around in their world, they don't actually see those things happening. And that's one of the things that allows the rating to be lower on those things, because it's not something that a child experiences in their own life. Then as you start to move up in the ratings, things start to get a little more realistic. Things like SpongeBob are a little more realistic than Peppa Pig, or at least look more realistic in the world. And then as you move up, they get more realistic. So compare a video game of something like a Disney video game or a SpongeBob video game to Call of Duty. Call of Duty is created to look as realistic as it possibly can so that it draws you into this environment. All that is really important because as kids are experiencing these different forms of media, their brain is encoding that information to make sense of their world. So if they are exposed to something that is too realistic and too intense for their developmental level, then what will happen is the child can actually be traumatized by that information. If they are playing Call of Duty and they're seeing people get shot and killed and blood and it looks very real, that information that the child's brain is taking in can cause trauma. And for adults like you and like me, it doesn't cause that trauma because we see the disconnect in the world. We see that, yes, it looks realistic, but this is a video game. But to a child, they can't make that distinction as easily. That's why those ratings are higher. The other thing to understand that maybe you didn't know is that if something is rated at a certain level, then everything surrounding that program is allowed to be at that level, even if it's at that level for different reasons. Let me explain. There are lots of sci-fi movies or superhero movies that are rated PG-13 for action, violence, and some language. Now, it would be great if all of the commercials and trailers and everything that went along with that movie were also rated PG-13 or lower for action, violence, and language, but they are allowed to show movies and trailers and commercials and other things that are rated PG-13 for other reasons. It could be you go to see a superhero movie that's rated PG-13 for action, violence, and language, and there's a trailer for a movie that is rated PG-13 for sexual content or for gore, whatever it might be. So you have to understand the full rating. That just because your child might be ready for this one specific movie does not mean that they're ready for all of the things they may be exposed to by going to see that movie or even by watching that movie on television or a TV show. The commercials that surround a TV show have to be the same age rating as the television show, but they can be rated the same for different reasons. All that to say, it's important to understand your child, know what it is that could be appropriate for them specifically and on an individual basis. And as a parent, it's really important to have insight into what your child is watching. Do you sit and watch things with them? Do you watch on YouTube with them as they go through their scrolling sensational time? Do you see what it is that they are seeing, and do you feel like it's appropriate for them? It's okay to and important to have those conversations with your child about what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and why it is appropriate or is not appropriate right now in their life. Not that they can never watch it ever, but that right now it might just be too intense. Those are some of the reasons why ratings can be so important. And I know that it can be trendy to kind of let your child play whatever, watch whatever, go to the movies and see whatever. But it's really important to keep it in mind, because the things that children are exposed to, the things that their minds are exposed to, can shape their worldview, and it can also leave a lasting impact. Thank you so much for that question.